Andre De Ruyter, the CEO of Eskom, did an interview on Tuesday with ENCA, and on Wednesday, he was out. I watched the interview, and when I watched the interview, I had a Ronaldo moment. You watch it and you learn a lot, but you immediately recognize that this guy is not going to be able to stay in the job. He just touched too many people in 1 hour to be able to remain at Eskom. So they've said, end of Feb, he's out, gone, hamba. And that's not a surprise because it was evident that that's going to happen. Three things I want to talk about and give some analysis around. Number one, he spoke about corruption. Number two, he spoke about governance. Number three, he spoke about the strategic direction of Eskom. On some of those things, he was right. On some of those things, he was wrong. So, what did he say? He said that there is massive corruption and that ministers and high level police officers are aware of this massive corruption. He said that the ministers knew. He said that the ministers tolerate, and they told him you have to even allow people to be able to eat. They know about overcharging. They know about companies with no track record. He implicated the procurement team. He said that, he told police generals, and they showed that they had low energy and that cases were being dropped which shouldn't have been dropped. That discussion that he shared around the level and extent of corruption, with the bad coal being delivered and swapped out, with companies with only one director being given massive contracts, with people charging 80,000 per item, which costs 300 rands at Builder's Warehouse. Those things are very important and they must be investigated properly by parliamentary committees. They must get statements from him, make sure that all of this is put on the record, because you never know. The kind of stuff that he shared is the kind of stuff that can lead to all kinds of consequences. And we know that this is a country where people have been assassinated. We know that that lady who revealed the extent of corruption in the Gauteng Department of Health, Babita Dekoran, she was assassinated. She was killed, shot down as she was driving. So when it comes to the corruption conversation, I don't think that I can take anything away from Andre De Ruyter. When it comes to governance, that's when his own weaknesses are exposed, because he then said, when the new board was appointed, he was like very, very despondent. He didn't want to work with them because he'd be starting again. The board that he had was not fit for purpose. His board didn't have industrialists. His board didn't have engineers. His board was full of people who come from backgrounds such as law and management. And that's not enough to run a utility like Eskom, which has many operational things which need to be addressed. You do need engineers on the board. You do need industrialists on the board because they're the ones using the energy. So I think that this started to reflect what we've all known for a while, that De Ruyter was bad at the job. He actually made things worse at Eskom, and we mustn't forget that. In 2018, there were 12 days of load shedding. In 2022, there were 207 days of load shedding. That is an exponential increase in load shedding. Even today, even as I'm recording this video, I have load shedding, and we're going into stage 8 because he failed to fix the generation issues. Now, why did he fail to fix the generation issues? Fundamentally, because he has been pushing for decarbonization. He basically wants all of the Eskom coal power stations to be shut down, and he has been pushing for that. When the executive of an organization doesn't care about a particular industry, it shows in poor maintenance and poor outcomes. That's why the energy availability factor went down. Now, let's be very clear. Does South Africa need to decarbonize? Not immediately. Not immediately. Because right now, South Africa still needs to industrialize at a higher level. The manufacturing that is happening currently in South Africa is not the kind of manufacturing that will solve the 70% unemployment problem with youth. South Africa is manufacturing textiles at 4%. It's manufacturing furniture at 4%. It's manufacturing electronic equipment at 3%. You need to grow those. And in order to grow those and industrialize in those sectors and make advantage of the African continental free trade area, you actually need to increase your energy consumption, which means you need to increase your energy generation. The challenge with insisting that decarbonization is the only way is that you focus only on solar and wind, and those are not sufficient to industrialize to the level that South Africa needs to. Number two, when it comes to the highest emitters of carbon emissions in the world, right? African countries do not feature in the top five. It's America, it's China, it's India, it's Germany, it's the United Kingdom. Those are the biggest polluters on the planet. So why should the obligation to decarbonize be placed on African countries when they haven't even made a dent on their industrialization journey? You cannot become a modern economy without industrialization of finished goods and products, period. Now, when you then try to adopt this as the CEO of Eskom, at a time when the country still needs to even provide electricity still to rural areas and homes at a stable supply, and also to manufacturing, that's just the wrong thing. African nations don't have this obligation. The obligation rests fundamentally on the developed world. They are the ones who must decarbonize. They are the ones who must move ahead with that, not Africa. Now, is the departure of Andre de Ruyter a good thing? Yes. Ultimately, yes. He was bad at the job. He made things worse, right? And while this interview was very important to revealing corruption at Eskom, I don't think that Eskom is served right now by a CEO who doesn't believe in its primary cash cow, which is coal power generation. That's where things are right now. And you can't have somebody who comes in there trying to facilitate for IPPs, trying to get private players on the board. Electricity is a public good. And when you privatize a public good, all that does is that poor communities are underserved, the price goes up. His approach, just to get private players onto the Eskom grid, is going to make those private players rich, but it's not going to improve energy availability factor. It's not going to improve generation, and also it's not going to be able to meet the national energy needs of South Africa. So that's what I think about all of this that has happened with Eskom. What should people be looking out for in the coming weeks and months? Number one, the people who are coming into Eskom, do they have relationships with IPPs? Do they own or have shares in IPPs? Because if they do, they're not going to serve Eskom well, because they're trying to push for their IPPs to make money. And number two, what experience does that person have running, one, large-scale enterprises, but two, what technical knowledge do they have? Because if you don't know engineering, if you don't have an electricity background, logistics background, both, I don't think that this is the job for you. Anyway, those are my thoughts. What do you think? Are you shocked about everything that's happened at Eskom, or is this everything that you thought? And which ministers do you think are the ones who are implicated in this? Because he seemed to indicate to me more than one person. He even said something that, the State Security Agency was spying on him when he went to COP17. Yo, it was a lot. It was a lot.